headed into the rugged terrain to the west, though, and this is the danger of reading a book that's already published. There's a big mistake here, and I can't wait for the day that somebody says, hey, you know. As the day wore on, they traversed a series of rocky ridges until encountering one too precipitous to climb. Faced with turning south toward the highway or north, they headed into the more rugged terrain to the north. The canyon narrowed, then dead-ended. Their only choice, besides returning the way they came, was to climb the ridge to the west. The sun was dipping toward the horizon as Minna finally staggered to the top of the ridge. She bent over, hands on her knees, breathing hard and willing her meager lunch to stay where it was. Ulf, having reached the top long before her, stood in his awkward way, one hand on the hip, staring to the north. Minna straightened on trembling legs, massaging her lower back, and following his gaze. The ridge rose gradually northward to the shoulders of Shonemedemi. Most of the land lay in twilight, but the snow-capped peak, catching the last rays of sunlight, glowed orange against the deep blue evening sky. Go Gators. A westerly wind, lifting a glittering veil of powdery snow from the peak and scattered it toward the east. Minna turned away, drawing her cloak around herself, and peered down into the shadowy canyon below. They had not seen the brothers since the first time, and I'm sorry about the hat there.
No, punish you later.
To the west, across the narrow canyon, a stand of scrubby pines clinging stubbornly to the top of the ridge were limned by the setting sun. A small group of lannan flitted among the trees, disappearing into the sun's orange glare, strobing across the trunks and reappearing on the other side. For one panicky moment, Minna wondered if one of them was supposed to be her spirit guide. How was she supposed to recognize it? How would the one spirit meant for her find her as she traipsed the mountains? She chewed her lower lip. As important as Beatu made a sound, you would think she would have been a little bit more helpful. Riddles and half answers. The scrubby grass covering the top of the ridge transitioned into a dense mix of evergreens and hardwoods as the ridge descended south toward the highway. She crossed the narrow spine of the ridge to the eastern side and looked down. Below, a small stream flowed south from the mountain. Across the stream, forest stretched eastward across the narrow valley. It was a good place to stop for the night. It would be nearly impossible for anyone to sneak up on them. Ulf, I can't keep going. She dropped her pack and bow and sat heavily, facing the forest to the east, resting her arms on her knees. Ulf settled beside her. They sat in silence, lost in their thoughts. After several minutes, Ulf asked, "Are you okay?" No, she wasn't okay. She finally found someone who could help her understand herself. Then the Empire and a traitor took her away. Helen was lost, beyond even the small hope she had of saving her, and she killed. Her breath caught, and she pushed the memory away. But instead of saying all of this, she nodded, staring absently into the distance. What do we do now? We go where Zaina told us to go. When Minna nodded, he continued, sounding relieved. They'll expect us. If we don't show up, no telling what they'll think. We can ask them what we should do about your sister. Minna didn't respond. Minna, can you do that thing? What thing? The thing Beatu taught you. I know you're tired, but it hurts. Minna closed her center, feeling guilty. That was why Ulf was staying so far from her all day. The whole time, Minna was sure she was angry with her, and he was just too polite to say anything. I'm sorry, Ulf, I forgot. That's okay. She knew what he would say, but she had to ask, which way is Brennan? When Ulf didn't answer, Minna looked up to find him staring into the distance, jaw muscles working. He took a breath and turned toward her, caught her eye, and held it. When he spoke, it had the practiced cadence of a well-rehearsed argument. Minna, the soldiers who have Aelin will be in Brennan soon. We'll never catch them, even if we had horses. When Minna didn't respond, he continued, we don't have enough food or money, and I just asked which way it is. Deflating, Ulf turned toward the cliff's edge, sat cross-legged, and plucked at blades of grass. They sat quietly as the sun dipped below the horizon behind them, neither able to muster the energy to argue. As the moon's spectral glow replaced the sun's gold, the mournful hooting of an owl in the forest below broke the silence. Minna said in a flat tone, maybe I should just ask the owl what to do. Ulf chuckled. My father told me that story too. Great! That's really useful. Hey, owl, why didn't my parents tell me the truth? She sucked in her breath, pressing her fists against her thighs, swallowing a sob. She sensed Ulf moving and felt a hesitant hand on her back. Shaking it off, she lurched to her feet on shaky legs. Throwing her arms out, she stood on the rim and shouted into the abyss. Why didn't anyone ever tell me? How hard would it be? She paced along the cliff edge, glaring at Ulf. Look what I learned in one day. The guilt she felt at Ulf's frightened expression fueled her anger. She was tired of having to always think of other people's feelings, of tiptoeing meekly around everyone. I hid from the world, and when I did come to town, I ignored the whispers and dirty looks. I never fought back when other children chased me and threw rocks at me. She stopped in front of Ulf, bent over him and pointed at her chest. I kept to myself so I wouldn't offend them. They don't know how lucky they are that I'm... She felt the whirlwind stir in her mind and pressure rising. No! She gritted her teeth and pushed savagely against it. I have a right to be angry. The wind stilled, taking her fury with it. Dropping her arms limply to her side, she looked up at the Lanan, who had come to rotate slowly above her, perhaps sensitive to her anguish. Minna? She spoke in a soft, bleak tone. Beatus had events intervened, whatever that means. Lowering her eyes to the moon's pale face, she gestured vaguely with one hand. All they had to do was explain. Aelin would be home, and her breath caught, and she trembled, but she needed to say the words. Jason would be alive. Her chin dropped to her chest, and she squeezed her eyes shut. They would build a small house, cozy and warm. They would have a son and a daughter, blonde and blue-eyed, like their father. And as if collapsing into the void once occupied by that small, hopeless dream, she sagged in on herself, folding her arms across her chest and swaying precariously on the precipice. And then Ulf's arms were around her, holding her back and lowering her to the ground. Minna melted against him, lay her head on his chest, and wept.